All right, let's get started. Hi everyone. How are you doing this afternoon? Has it been a good day? That's good. I'm quite impressed that we're going on this late in the afternoon, so I hope to keep you awake. If you feel a bit tired, don't be afraid to stand up if you want to hear it, or fall asleep if you prefer to get a small rest before the next speaker is coming on the stage here. So today I'm going to talk about a topic, what to do with the problems you cannot solve. And I noticed earlier today there was a talk about emotional intellect. How many of you were in that talk earlier today? Okay, quite impressive. So it seems like it's a topic that interests you over here. I'm quite pleased to see that. How many of you are using the translation guide? All right. If you have problems understanding what I'm saying, just ask me to slow down or repeat. That's fine. And we're just going to take it slow. So feel free to ask any questions as we go along. And I expect there will be some time at the end of the session as well where you can ask questions if you have any. So my name is Mette. I'm from Denmark, and I'm... It's not picking up? Okay. The guy sitting in the back, can you hear me? No. All right. So I come from Denmark, and I'm quite pleased to be here. I was delighted to get invited, and when I first was supposed to submit a suggestion for what to talk about here, I submitted something about agile and testing and quality, and I was told, don't! It's completely no-go. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I thought, I hope my second idea will be accepted so I can come here and find out why it is so no-go. But it seems like you are quite interested in this topic, and then I heard from some other people that you actually have dedicated conferences to talk about agile. So it's not because you're not interested, it's just you hear a lot about it and have a lot of opportunities. So today we're going to talk about something completely different than agile. All right, so it's perhaps a bit of a different title, because nowadays when I work in different companies, very often I meet people who talk about a lot of things that are not really working for them, but I seldom hear the word problem. So maybe you recognize some of these words as frequently used when things are not really going the way we would like them to go. And they're quite positive, these words, I think, which is a good thing. But sometimes we might not have a positive view on the situation we're in. And then when we use other words, it might not really go with how we feel about it, linking back to the presentation earlier today. So I like to use the word problem about problems. And then once we know we have a problem, we can deal with it. There's also the thing that problems are good to have in order to have an interesting work time. If we didn't have any problems, wouldn't it be a bit boring? But sometimes we also have the situation where problems, we're not able to solve them, and they just become bigger and bigger problems, and in the end we can feel stuck or blocked. In order to move forward, something needs to happen, but we cannot see the way. What is it we should do to actually move forward? And sometimes when this situation happens and it involves other people in our organization, for example, then we might get into a conflict. It could be that we want to do something and there is a manager who tells us, no, this is not what we need to do. It could be that we would like one of our colleagues to help us with do something, and we get a no, can't do. So in that sense, small problems can grow and become bigger, and in the end we can have conflicts which are not very productive, which can be actually counterproductive to any progress and, you can say, satisfaction in going to work and the likelihood of us succeeding in what we're trying to do. So I think it's really important to talk about not only problems, but actually the worst part of it, when it actually turned into a conflict. Because I do see testing as a conflict-prone business in the sense that many of us probably share certain personal traits, characteristics. So when I think about a tester, detail-oriented, devoted, maybe perfectionist, at least want to do a good job, and often quite thorough, and maybe a bit critical thinking. And as part of our job, I think some of us at least see it as we do sometimes find defects, and of course it's our job to make sure that it doesn't go unnoticed, that these problems are actually in front of us. Now, if we combine that with a normal day at work, at least what I've experienced throughout some years, tight deadlines, missing requirements, many defects, but I just went to a different presentation here earlier today where I got some really good tips on how to get rid of that. So it might be that that item will not be on the slides next time I present, if I am able to get my way. Do you recognize some of these things from your daily work? Some of you nodding? Okay. So these two things together, I think, can create an explosive cocktail. That if we are not aware of it, and if we are not good at preventing it from exploding, we can have different situations at work where basically things will blow up in our face. Or, if it's not us, often we will see colleagues who are actually maybe having problems and where it ends up blowing up next to us. But it's still going to be within our team or something that affects us. So that's why I think knowing how to deal with problems we cannot solve, how to deal with conflicts, are quite important for our success in our work life, also in our personal life. But let's talk work while we're here, and then you can always use this also in any other setting, because this is not just narrowed into your work. It is something that just works whatever you are thinking about and where you might run into problems or conflicts. All right. So what is a conflict? Any one of you who would like to share with me what you see as a conflict? Because I know that when you come from different countries, we use different languages, we might have different perceptions of what a conflict is. So what do you see as a normal conflict at work, for example? Yeah. Could I get you to repeat with the microphone, please?
Conflict could be some different opinions on critical questions that are discussed by you and your colleague or, I don't know, team member.
Right. And what would a critical question be, for example?
It could relate to any area. It could relate to responsibility, to approach, to any other thing.
Okay.
Just critical for you personally.
Right. That's a good point. Critical for you personally, and it can relate to responsibility or maybe some of the work areas you're working on, which is seen as critical. Good. Okay. So what could be what could be an example between testers and developers? We'll just get the mic over so you can all join in.
We have such kind of conflicts in our organization when testers are going to developers with defects.
Okay.
And developers cannot solve these defects. They say that it is not defect, it is feature, or we won't fix that.
Right.
So the testers.
What do the testers then do? Cry.
Sometimes cry. Sometimes they get angry, and they go to managers, to analytics. So this conflict becomes more bigger and bigger. So
Right. Okay.
that's all.
Thank you. Very good example. So between your colleagues, between you and your manager, maybe between people you actually don't work closely with but are critical for what you're doing, you might hit a wall where things cannot be done. Very good examples. I've also experienced some of those you mentioned there, so I can definitely relate to that. And that's why I've started to become more and more interested in what is it actually we can do to make it easier on ourselves, on our colleagues, and also for the benefit of the company, because it is so much more fun to be happy and have a good collaboration than being in a conflict that is just escalating and becoming worse and worse. So, if we talk about conflict, we are probably thinking many different things. Each of us have a perception of conflict. What do you think when you hear the word conflict? I'm just going to present two different definitions to sort of highlight the point of perception. So a quite traditional definition here. And what we see is that we are talking about two parties or more who are trying to get their wishes fulfilled, but also to make sure the other ones don't get their wishes fulfilled. And then we have another definition from a different point of view. We're still talking about differences, but here we're not talking about eliminating the other party. We're talking about making use of the energy that there is in a conflict. There is good energy, because when we have a conflict, it's impossible to have a conflict with someone who has no energy and who's not responding. You can try and see next time maybe your colleague come and if the person is shouting, how long will that person keep shouting if you are doing absolutely nothing? There's no energy, no responding to whatever the person does. It's going to be really, really difficult to keep that going. So in conflict, there is tension, and that's energy, and that can be used positive or negative. So in that sense, if we have that view on conflicts, that means there are some good things to take out of it, but it also means that we need to look out for it before it gets destructive. And that's what we're going to look into today. So with a colleague of mine, I've been thinking about how can we easily talk about what do we do with these conflicts. Because if we look into the area of human behavior, psychology, all sorts of things, you can study for 100 years and you haven't looked at it all. So there's so many things to do. So the intention here is to give you a basic flavor of different aspects that you might be interested in looking into afterwards in order to become better at dealing with conflicts in your daily life and especially at your work. So we have a 3-step process where we call the phases acknowledge, change, transition. So we think it's quite simple, 3 steps. 3 small words. How difficult can it be? So what I'm going to do today is walk you through these 3 steps and hopefully inspire you to grab some of it, go out yourself, become a bit more wiser on different areas, and try and apply it wherever you are and see if it helps you. So first part, acknowledge. Sometimes in order to know that we are in a conflict, we need to be aware of it. We need to actually recognize that we are in a conflict. And sometimes you can say, how can you not know that you're in a conflict? Well, some people actually find it difficult and can see in retrospect, oh wow, that was a conflict, but it isn't actually before they're quite late into the process. So one of the things, and I had it myself, the experience, I thought we were on pretty good terms, and then a couple of days later, it turned out we were not. And therefore, I think this model at least helped me, if not in the process, then at least retrospect, to help me have a look at what happened and try to get a bit wiser on why did this happen and what do I do next time so it doesn't go this way. So conflicts are like escalators. You know the ones we have in shopping centers or subway stations? It's more or less the same. Once you get on it, it starts automatically to take you upwards. But what is very different is that conflicts usually tend to start in a very slow pace, but the higher up you get, the faster it goes. So the bigger the conflict, the more you get sucked into it, and before you know it, it's actually escalating really, really fast, and it can be really difficult to get off it. So we do have emergency buttons on escalators, but once it's really in a high speed, it's really difficult to push it, and sometimes you need someone else to do it for you, because you are simply too busy trying to hold on to the handrail that you can do anything about the conflict. So also keep that in mind sometimes when you see good colleagues of you, good friends, who are in what you perhaps perceive, looks like a conflict, and it looks like they're still feeding the conflict, and you can wonder, why are they not stopping it? It might be because they are so high up on the escalator that they have no means of stopping it at the point where they are at that point, and they need help. So, if we look at that conflict escalator, there are certain stages that you could try and identify. If not while you're in it, then at least retrospect. So first of all, and this is the good kind of conflict that we talked about, we're disagreeing, but we're still open to listen. What is it actually you're trying to say? That's a good argument, okay. Let's find a compromise, let's make something better. So we can actually have the win-win, even though we disagree, and at the beginning it seems, okay, we are not the best of friends here, but we can work it out and we find good solutions. As long as we are here, this is actually something that helps us become even better at collaborating with each other, because we find each other's strengths and weaknesses and how we can complement each other. So this is the level which is really good. Once it becomes worse than that, it usually becomes personal. And that means that we are not only talking about the issue, but we are also starting to think negatively about the person, not just listening to the arguments, but thinking there must be something wrong with you. Because if you can say like that, there's something wrong. There must be something wrong. Still here, I think this is everyday work life. It can easily happen. It's not too bad, but it might be where we need to start thinking about, why is it that I'm thinking that about the person? And should I get back to the actual issue at hand instead of focusing here? So this is where our small alarm clocks should start to give a small ring for us. Once it becomes worse, we're not only just focusing on the problem at hand, we go back and we think about all the problems this person has actually caused us, and we add that to the current problem. So now we're not just solving whatever we're facing today, we're adding, You know, last time when I didn't get my way, or when you actually made me do stuff I didn't want to do, or last time you said no to me, or whatever. So it's no longer just about the issue at hand, and this is where it gets complicated, because you can't just solve what you have in front of you, because there's so much added in the case. Also, this is where we are really in a bad condition when we talk work atmosphere, because this is where you can really hear people that they are not actually confronting the person talking directly, but they are starting to talk bad things about the person. And that's when it gets really, really bad. So now we are in a situation where the people actually stopping to talk. So at least when we go there and we start crying, okay, we still have a dialogue in some sense. But here, we're not even going to talk to the person. We're not even going to try and solve it, so we might try and navigate through other people to get it resolved, but we are no longer trying to actually get a collaboration going. So this is where we are getting to the definition about trying to be making sure the other ones don't get their way. It's not only that I get my way, but it's also making sure that they don't get their way. That becomes very important too. Yeah, it just gets worse, as you can see. So now it doesn't even matter what we are discussing. Now it's just about having a really bad relation, and we're in a conflict together. And it's, again, just about now the person, the relationship. And we are way beyond any constructive thing that could have helped us in the situation. And it's just on the cost of whatever we do in our project and our work life. I don't know if you've ever, if you think back, been in a situation with open hostility. I did once. In one company, I actually had the, I won't call it pleasant experience, but it was a very good experience, that I ended up in a situation where one of my colleagues fell out. And I'm not sure, to be honest, what happened, but I can see that definitely we went from testing to something about how we were doing things, and in the end it became about the person, about what that person was doing and what I wanted to do. And in the end we actually ended up in the situation that we were fighting against each other. And I must admit, in hindsight, I was not very good at open war, but I was fairly good at this discreet, you know, when you sort of poke people, and you do it in a subtle way, but nonetheless, when you are in this situation, it really, really ticks them off. So we ended up having basically the test team split between who do you like, are we going to do this way or that way, and in the end, we actually ended up departing because it was so bad that it was affecting so many people around us. Fortunately, I've never been in that one. I've never been hit by anyone or have anyone hit me. So thanks for that. I'm trying very hard to keep on the lower levels and not get up into the higher levels. Because of course I've actually seen people who were almost taking it outdoor and start fighting. And I'm like, we're doing testing, come on. What's going on here? But this is how bad it can really go. And even when people move apart, the conflict will still be there, and that is extreme. And of course we can all agree this is not going to serve any good purpose at all, and we would like to keep it on the very lower levels. What I said before about the escalator, that we cannot stop it ourselves, is once you get caught in the middle levels, it goes really quick, and suddenly you find yourself in a really, really hard place to get out of. So push the stop button. If you can, reach it, and if not, cry help and hope someone else will come. So if someone else needs to do it, that's where we call facilitator in, who can help us actually calm things down and let us start again. Good. We've recognized we're in a conflict. Second step, let's change. And by change, I mean, let's look at ourselves. Why are we reacting like this? What is it that makes us tick off? Because the person is obviously doing something that really makes me annoyed. And also, what can I then do? So that is the second step. Find out I'm in a conflict, then how can I change myself? Now, most of you, or half of you, were in the earlier presentation today. So I'm not going to talk very much about how the brain is built up. But we do have, at least that's what science thinks at the moment, these different parts of the brain that was developed over time, and they have different functions. But one of the ones we are really important about is the ones that came earliest, which are very much responsible for our survival. And what we often talk about is that when we get in pressured situations, we do have a survival strategy. So the brain basically calculates, okay, what do I need to do here to optimize my survival chances? And it will choose fight, flight, or freeze. So if we are pushed hard, often all this logic just turns off, and we go down to basic mode, and we are left with 3 options, and most often these are unconscious. So we are not, like I was not in this situation thinking, all right, today should I fight, or should I freeze, or should I, run away? It just happens. It just happens in the different situations, and that's what makes it really hard to actually change, but just by becoming aware of it is the first step. About being emotional hijacked, and it's just to say that once you end up in these situations, you're not yourself. So have you ever done anything where you afterwards said, like, that's not like me? That's not how I usually do? Have you ever tried that? That is what is called emotional hijacked, where the body actually responds, or the unconscious responds before your conscious brain actually do anything. And this is a very good thing because it keeps us alive and it makes sure that we are safe. But unfortunately, sometimes the way the unconscious calculate that we are safe, it does it by saying, okay, let's look at where we are now, what's going on. Something happens. You might meet that person again you're having a conflict with, and then you go back and think, okay, of all this, what does this remind me of? So the brain and the conscious and unconscious mind work in a way that we don't process everything. We just see what is this pattern like, and we match it to something in the past that resembles this pattern. And if we have really bad experiences connected with that, where we were feeling maybe under threat, we will match the pattern, and then we would calculate, how is this going to affect me in the future? So we would try and project what outcomes can come of this. And if we see a bad outcome, then our survival instinct takes over, and we go probably into the reaction pattern we had in the past that kept us safe, regardless of that reaction pattern being very counterproductive to the actual situation in a social setting. But that's not what's important. The important thing is, did I survive? Oh, I did. So if, for example, yelling and screaming of someone you find frightening is helping, that person maybe goes away, then that can be a reaction pattern that you learn and that you use as a survival pattern. And that means in different situations, if you are pressured enough and feel under threat, you might end up shouting at that person. And that's maybe not so good if it's your manager who's just going to either promote you or demote you. Then we don't want to shout. But the unconscious mind is thinking about, this is a dangerous situation. Did he go away? Yes, he did. Ah, bravo, I'm safe. So that is something that makes it really hard for us to understand, why am I doing this when I can logically see it's counterproductive, and still I do it again and again. So therefore, we need to change. If we don't do something, we're going to do it again and again, because that's what the unconscious does for us. It keeps us safe. And it's really lovely, but sometimes we might want to do something else. There are a model called Neurological levels, and it has different aspects of what you can say our whole world is made of and what actually impacts on how we both perceive things, what we do, and so on and so forth. I can see I'm talking slower today than I actually expected, so I'll just go a bit quicker. So that's why I'm not going to explain too much about it, but if you're interested, go and have a look at neurological levels. It's quite interesting as to how you can actually choose to change different things in your life. So the idea is that there are many things that trigger our way of behaving and being and so on and so forth. And any of these, making a change in any of these things, can have an impact on how things are going. So of course, if you have a bad manager, where you do have problems, of course you can just change your job. Problem gone. But if that is your normal answer, whenever things get difficult, that you actually exit, you might be in a flight mode. So your normal suggestion pattern is, let's get out of here. And it works well for you. But it might be that you actually like this company quite a lot. And actually you want to stay, but your unconscious end up that you go in and say, in a nice manner, I quit my job. Behavior, of course, how is it? Are we crying when we see the developer who doesn't want to fix our defect? If that normally works, keep crying if you think that's the right way. But changing the behavior can impact how things goes. And the idea is that any level you change on can impact other levels. However, the higher up you come, the bigger the chance is that it will make a significant impact. So if you think of yourself as the tester who always cry in order to get the defects fixed, then that will affect what you believe, what you do, your coping strategies, what you do towards that developer and so on. So if you decide, I'm actually going to be the tester who's going to have a wonderful chat with my developer in order to figure out why this defect is not a defect, then that will affect all the things you think about yourself. Probably it will affect how am I going to go about tackling this problem, how am I actually going to act, because first of all, I'm not going to cry any longer because I'm not the crying tester. And in the end, it should hopefully give you some better results in your environment. So this is a really nice model to help actually think myself, what can I do, what do I want to do? And the interesting part is what we call the butterfly effect, is that a small change in a small corner can have a big impact somewhere else. So it comes out of a weather simulation program where they changed a little bit in the simulation, which they thought this is not going to make any impact at all. And the results that came out running on the same data was completely different and unexpected, just by changing a very little tiny thing, which were not supposed to have any impact at all, out in the very last digits of that numbers. So even if we think we're really, really stuck, just by changing a small thing can have these positive ripple effects, where things will actually start improving much quicker, faster than you have actually imagined they would. Excellent. So now we have realized, okay, I'm in a conflict. All right, I can see how I can change. I know how I would like to change, and I want to do something about it, which is quite important. Then we have a meeting, perhaps. We want to talk to the other person. It might be that if we are in these really serious conflicts, we do have a conflict facilitator who helps us actually manage the meeting. Because it's important that we do meet to understand that we are not there to say, okay, now again, I want it my way. And we do keep ourselves open. We want solutions, but it's not my solution, and it's not their solutions. We just want and outcome. So once we start collaborating just a little bit to keep enforcing the good circle and to boost the butterfly effect, we can actively look for ways to increase the collaboration. So if I only talk to my developer when I'm having a defect, it could be that there could actually be other ways I could help him or her, and that could actually improve our relationship and improve the way we collaborate. So not just trying to get out of the conflict to say, okay, one conflict down, 10,000 to go, but actually say, how do we boost this? How do we make more of this? I'm not going to talk much about the conflict triangle. It's basically based on the drama triangle, a tool for analyzing how you react when you are with people. It's based in psychoanalysis, transactional analysis, and it basically operates with 3 roles. A victim role, where we are completely like, I can't help it, it's not my fault, I don't know what to do, and also I cannot do anything, and I don't want to do anything, I'm just basically sucking out the energy of everything. The persecutor. We probably all can think about someone we've met. Quite aggressive, wanting to really promote their ideas, and as we saw, probably in the more aggressive, trying to get their way over anyone else's way. And then the third one is called rescuer, and that's a quite tricky role, because at the outlook of it, the rescuer sounds like a very good thing. I mean, who doesn't want a rescuer? It's really nice when you are in trouble that someone comes and rescue you. However, the point is that some people actually do it in order to put others down, in order to promote themselves, and that the rescuing is actually not about helping. It's about making sure that the rescuer person feels good about themselves. Then I can do something which you can't, so I'll feel better about myself. So when we are in conflicts and we are not aware about it, we often take different positions in this triangle depending on how the dialogue goes. So whenever we talk, we can switch roles. And often we do have a favorite role where we would often start. So some people might usually have a tendency to fight back. If they are feeling under attack or under threat, they will respond with an attack. And other people might be just in victim mode and just, yeah, I can't help it, it's nothing I can do. This can be helpful to think about once you are trying to get a collaboration up and going, what am I doing, what is my role, what is the other one doing? And then the idea is, of course, to try and communicate on what we would call an adult level, on a more logical, reasonable level, to take us out of the conflict. Yes, so they have their own, you can say, back to the fight, flight, and freeze state. So again, depending on our favorite coping strategy, that's usually where we will start. But we will move around. Whenever you have an argument, you can notice, where am I now? And you will be swapping around, and as you might start as a victim, you might suddenly get into the attacker role, and then back to victim again. And that's how it's funny to see, wow, my good, I'm part of this conflict as well. And that's when we can start again to change. So, it takes 2 to tango. It takes 2 to collaborate. Some people are just difficult. Have you ever met someone, no matter what you do, they just don't get it? Are just being difficult, yeah. They're in the conflict triangle. They're trying their best. Or, if the common denominator is always you, it might be you who's the difficult person. So just take a look at that. But often it's going to be the other ones, don't worry. Yes. So it's important to recognize that we're all trying our best, and according to their perception, they're trying to solve the problem as well, and you're just in the way. And as we saw with the conflict triangle, we are trying to protect ourselves, and that's the way that we get emotional hijacked and start to respond in ways which are not really on the top level of the brain development hierarchy, in the sense that we go back to more basic instincts in order to protect ourselves based on patterns, experiences we have from the past. But that can be dealt with. So this is basically 3-step process: acknowledge, change, and transition. And the last part is, of course, very difficult and can take longer. But if we start with ourselves, we have already taken a big step forward to avoid getting on the escalator at first, and if we do it, to actually be able to stop it before it gets completely out of hand. Thank you very much. I'm out of time, so I'll stop here.